Shabbat Shalom. At this time, it's my honor and privilege to present to you the great Kahan Yeshua. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today we're going to go straight into the law of Yahweh. And one thing we have to realize about Yahweh's law is it's not just a one-time thing. You can't say, well, I kept all the laws of Yahweh at once. Now I don't have to do it anymore. The laws of Yahweh are a continuous thing we'll be practicing throughout entire eternity. So no matter what the law is, and I'm going to cover the first one. The first one is going to be positive law number 53. I'll be turning over to Deuteronomy chapter 12 and verse 5. Now this is one of the first laws that most of us started to do whenever we were caught up by Yahweh's house. We were seeking. Most of us for our entire lives. Some of us might have been brought here as children. But we sought out a place which offered something better, a place that offered this entire world hope. And when we found that place, we knew that that was the exact place we'd been looking for our entire life. But sadly, many people allow that law to slip on by and they forget. They have to continue to fulfill that law, to keep that law close to their hearts. Here in Deuteronomy chapter 12 and verse 5, we see, "But you are to seek the habitation of Yahweh your Father, the house of Yahweh, the place which Yahweh your Father shall choose out of all your tribes to establish His name, and there you must go." The word seek, it's Strong's Hebrew Dictionary, it's word number 1875, and it's the Hebrew word darash. And it means to tread frequent, usually to follow for pursuit or search. By implication, to seek or ask. Specifically, to worship and also to diligently inquire. Now right there, that should be showing you a lot of other laws that go along with this one law. You know, you just can't seek out Yahweh's house. You just can't find a place and then say, I found salvation. No, it requires a work. You have to put forth the effort into acquiring this position in Yahweh's house. Once you seek it, once you continue to seek it, you have to diligently, as that definition shows, you have to diligently and frequently tread, all right? You have to come frequently. You have to come to the appointed times that Yahweh has set up for us to be here. That's part of seeking Yahweh diligently. Now, the word frequent from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it means to associate with, to be in or resort to often or habitually, to do on a regular basis. So this is something, you just don't seek the house of Yahweh out on the Sabbath. You just don't seek the house of Yahweh out on the feast. This is something we have to do 24/7, seeking out Yahweh's house, seeking. Now, we're going to get into more about what it is to seek. Now, is it just to seek a body of people that you can go worship anywhere you want to? No, there's specific laws that cover this, and don't let any fool try to deceive you otherwise. Be turning over to Exodus chapter 15 and verse 17. Exodus chapter 15 and verse 17. It's found on page 57. It says, "You will bring them in and you will plant them on the mountain of your inheritance, the place, O Yahweh, you made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, O Yahweh, which your hands have established, the house of Yahweh." Now the word sanctuary in Strong's Hebrew Dictionary, it's 6942, and it means a consecrated thing or place, especially a palace, sanctuary, or asylum. It also means chapel or a hallowed part, a holy place, a sanctuary. Now the word sanctuary from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it means a place where someone or something is protected. You know, like an animal sanctuary or something where you place something in order to keep it safe. And that's what Yahweh's house is. This is a place that Yahweh has chosen in these last days to keep a specific people safe. Safe from the curses of this world through obedience. It also means the protection that is provided by a safe place. It says the room inside of a church, synagogue, etc., where religious services are held. So right there you can see this is speaking of a certain place, a certain locality. Now there's prophecies concerning this consecrated place that Yahweh would have established. Be looking over to Moshe chapter 3. It's found on page 696. Moshe chapter 3 and verse 3. "Can two walk together unless they're in agreement?" Can anyone walk with Yahweh in Yahweh's house without agreeing with Yahweh's house? Of course they can't. A little bit of doubt. a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of disagreeing with that doctrine or this doctrine, or how this situation's handled or that situation's handled. These things will determine whether or not we truly associate ourselves with Yahweh and Yahweh's house. And these will determine whether or not we separate ourselves from Yahweh or not. Look down to verse 7. It says, most assuredly, Father Yahweh will have no work other than the work that he has prophesied in advance by his servants, the prophets. So what was that work he prophesied of? If you're in doubt, or if you have someone telling you there's a different place other than Yahweh's house, well, let's find out for sure. Turn over to Yochanan chapter 4. Yochanan chapter 4, and starting in verse 19. Yochanan chapter 4 and verse 19. It's on page 818. It says, the woman said to the man, I see that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you, Yadim, say to worship in Jerusalem. This is the place where men ought to worship. It says, Yeshua said to her, woman, believe me, the hour comes when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You do not know what you worship. We know what we worship, for salvation is from the Yadaim. But the hour comes, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeks just for such worshipers to worship Him. Yahweh is a spirit being, and those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. All right? The word spirit in Strong's Greek Dictionary, it's word number 4151, and it means a rational soul or a mental disposition. So this is showing that the true worshipers, remember those words Yeshua used, the true worshipers of Yahweh, they're going to have a certain mental disposition about them. An irrational soul, the word rational from Merriam-Webster's, it means based on facts or reason and not emotions or feelings. Does that sound familiar? So what are the true worshipers going to be using? It also says having the ability to reason or think about things clearly. So the true worshipers of Yahweh are going to be worshiping in spirit. Or in other words, they're going to have the ability to stop and think of their options and proceed with the right choice without using their emotions. That's exactly what Yeshua Messiah was telling this woman that's going to come about in the last days. Spirit and in truth. Now, we're not going to turn there, but you should know it. If you don't, write it down. Truth, Psalms 119, 142, and 151. According to Yahweh's laws. The true worshipers of Yahweh will be worshiping Yahweh in spirit and in truth. In other words, the true worshipers of Yahweh are using the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program according to the law of Yahweh and not according to the lust of their own flesh in these last days. Now, to understand what the lust of the flesh is, we don't have time to turn there, but write down Romans chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. And you'll see those things that contradict what the Peaceful Solution is bringing forth in these last days. You'll see what this world is bringing forth. The lust of the flesh. Always fulfilling yourself. Always fulfilling the desires and your emotions that you have. That's not the true worshipers of Yahweh. And where are these true worshipers going to be at? Be turning over to Isaiah chapter 2. In Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 2, and this is also in Micaiah 4 and verse 1, it's on page 531. And he says, it will come to pass in the last days. Does anybody have any question what days we're in? Look at the things that's going on right before our very eyes in the news. This is the last days. This world cannot continue on any longer, and the sins and the curses that we've brought upon ourselves. But in the last days, the mountain and the promotion of the house of Yahweh will be established, and the chief of the nations, and will be raised above all congregations, and all nations will eventually flow to it. So an establishment, this place would be established. Now, a lot of people would have you believe that the establishment of the house of Yahweh isn't according to prophecy. It's actually, it goes against Yahweh's laws. That the house of Yahweh secretly was established. That the house of Yahweh did things that Yahweh says you shouldn't do. And they've never told anybody about this. Well, if you know what this book is right here, this is called the House of Yahweh Established, for those who have not read it. Now on page 26, you can go back as far as you want to the first printings of this book. On page 26 of this book, it says, "How was the house of Yahweh established?" In order to understand how the house of Yahweh was established, prophetically, we must understand the full meaning of the word establish. The Thorndike-Barnhart Dictionary gives the definition of this word establish, and it means to set up permanently or establish a business. Now, anyone who's ever established a business knows that you have to go down to the county clerk's office. Now, you used to have to go through a bunch of books. They used to have volumes of books you had to go through, and it was up to you to decide whether or not if anyone else had a business by that name. And if you try to establish another business or another organization that already had that name, it couldn't be done. It says bring about permanently, to settle in a position. It says cause to be accepted, to show beyond dispute, to prove. It also means, in definition number 5, to make a church or a national institution recognized and supported by the government. Now, certainly all of us knew that definition was there because we've read this book, right? We knew how the house of Yahweh was properly established, that it is recognized by the government. This isn't something new. This is for those who understand. Those who truly desire to be a part of Yahweh's house will understand this. It's always been from the beginning. Now, it says from this definition, we see that it makes more than just preaching or building a sanctuary to establish the house of Yahweh as prophecies were told. In 1981, through the guidance and the direction of Yahweh, an attorney was engaged to begin the process which officially established the house of Yahweh in the United States of America. He says, I would also like for you to be aware of this fact. There was not another officially recognized organization called the House of Yahweh in the United States. If there had been, it would have been prevented the establishment of the house of Yahweh in Abelin. Now, do you see Yahweh's hand and power in this? Do you realize just how many religious organizations there are in America? These religions could very easily have assumed the name the House of Yahweh. Except for the fact that Yahweh intervened to prevent this from taking place. Yahweh prevented this in order that his prophecy could be fulfilled. So there you have it right there. And it goes on to say that the charter from the state of Texas was granted in 7/21/1981, and the Internal Revenue Service of the United States, the chief nation of all nations, officially recognized the establishment of the House of Yahweh in 1983. Yahweh's house is established according to Yahweh's laws and according to the prophecies written about Yahweh's house. It's not something new. It's not something new. It's just for those who read it and understood it. For those who've never picked up what Yahweh puts out, the prophetic words, the newsletters, the booklets, the books, the things that teach us and guide us and help us to understand what Yahweh's house is and according to prophecy. Those who seek it out diligently, that's what it means. To seek out Yahweh's house, it means to pick up these books. It means to read. It means to put it to use within our own personal lives. That's what seeking Yahweh diligently means. Be turning over to Zechariah chapter 4. We're going to see more prophecies about the establishment of this house in these last days. Zechariah chapter 4, starting in verse 12. It says, Then I spoke to him again and said to him, What are these 2 olive branches which through the 2 golden pipes empty the golden oil through them? And he answered me and said, Do you not know what these are? And I said, No, my ruler. Then he said, These are the 2 anointed ones who stand for the supreme ruler of the whole earth. 2 anointed ones who stand for the supreme ruler. Now the supreme ruler, of course, is Yahweh. Now who stands for Yahweh? These 2 anointed ones. Prophesied of, spoken of. From the beginning of Genesis all the way through the book of Revelation, these men were spoken of to be in this position, to be here in these last days, to bring forth Yahweh's laws back to the people. That's what the establishment was. Now look down to 5. It says, Then the Malach was speaking with me and came forward and said to me, Lift up your eyes now and understand that which is sent by commandment, according to the law of Yahweh. And I asked him, said, What is it? And he answered, This is the ephah, the standard of perfection, which is sent by Yahweh's law. And then he added, This is honor, knowledge, and understanding throughout the whole earth. And behold, the sum total of the heaviest cover of deception and delusion was taken. And there was the first woman, the first heir of the house of Yahweh, established in the midst of the ephah, the standard of perfection, which is sent by Yahweh's laws. And this is the wickedness. And Satan overthrew the house of Yahweh within the midst of the ephah, and the standard of perfection sent by Yahweh's laws. But casting the same weight of lead of cover of deception against her mouth, successfully suppressing the word of Yahweh, the laws and the prophets. Now remember, after the house of Yahweh was wiped out almost 2,000 years ago, the laws of Yahweh weren't taught. Right? The laws of Yahweh were not brought forth to the people for almost 2,000 years. And he says, "Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, two women, the last two heirs of the house of Yahweh, sent with commandment. The Spirit of Yahweh came to overspread them, and they were covered with the covering of the saints. And they exalted and magnified and extolled the ephah, the standard of perfection sent by Yahweh's laws, separating the way of the world from the way of Yahweh. Then I said to the Malach who was speaking with me, where are they, the two witnesses going with the ephah? And he said to me, to build, that is establish, the house of Yahweh according to the standard of perfection sent by Yahweh's laws, and a Babylonian land which does not yet exist. And it will be established at that time when the two witnesses are called out to their work as the established place, the habitation of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh." The very place we sit. The very place we sit is where Yahweh fulfilled these prophecies. In a land not yet established, a Babylonian land, the chief nation of all nations. We have to remember all these things. Don't forget. And that's the main part of this sermon. Yes, this is the basic things we learned when we first came to the house of Yahweh. But these are the things that people that leave Yahweh's house forget. The basic things. These are the things they lose hold of. They can't grasp it anymore. Turn over to 2 Samuel chapter 20. It's on page 268. 2 Samuel chapter 20 and verse 18. "Then she spoke, saying, they used to speak long ago, saying, to receive an answer, ask at Abel, and that would settle the matter." Not just they used to speak long ago, but what she was saying was this was a law from the beginning. Right? Pastor brought that out. Write down this sermon. It was 1/26/2013. This was a law from the beginning. If you want to receive an answer, ask at Abel. Now, how do you go about that? Certainly Yahweh wouldn't leave us in the dark how to properly go to Abel and ask. No, of course not. There's laws concerning these things. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 17. Deuteronomy chapter 17, and start with verse 8. It says, "If a case comes up which is too difficult for you to judge, whether bloodshed, lawsuits, or assaults, then you shall take them to the place Yahweh your Father will choose. Go to the priests who are Levites, and to the judge who is in office at that time." Now remember, these people, the priest you go to receive judgment, have to be in office at that time. They have to be treading Yahweh's house frequently. They have to be seeking Yahweh's house diligently. That's how you know these men are priests of Yahweh. "Ask for their decision, and they will give you the sentence of judgment. You must act according to the sentence they pronounce for you at the place Yahweh chooses. Be careful to do all they order you to do. According to the law they teach you, you shall do, and according to the decisions they give you, you shall do. You must not turn aside to the right hand nor to the left from the sentence that they pronounce for you." Now look over to Deuteronomy chapter 18. Deuteronomy 18, look down to verse 18. Yahweh says, "I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among the brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything that I command him." In verse 19, but it says, "Whoever will not listen to my words, which he speaks in my name, I will judge him for it." In other words, these judgments will come to pass for those who defiantly, those who raise themselves up above their teachers, those who set themselves up to this place of God's, as in Isaiah chapter 12, the same pattern that Satan followed. But look at verse 20. "But a prophet who deliberately, willfully, and knowingly speaks a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to say, and who speaks in the name of any god, that prophet must be put to death." Now, this wasn't speaking of Yana, who went to Nineveh and told him, reluctantly, what was coming. But it didn't come to pass. No, because he spoke what Yahweh had commanded him. This is speaking to someone who takes it upon themselves. Remember what the word is. "But the prophet who deliberately and willfully and knowingly speaks a word in my name," someone who teaches against the laws of Yahweh, someone who teaches a law that is contrary to what you've been taught from Yahweh's house, "which I have not commanded him to say, or speaks in the name of any god." And we have to remember, when someone puts themselves up above the established authority placed in Yahweh's house, they place themselves as a god. They take on the characteristics of a god. So when anyone does this, and who speaks in the name of any god, that prophet must be put to death. These things will not be allowed in Yahweh's kingdom. Be turning over to 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and starting in verse 12. It's on page 938. Yes, and all who live righteously as Yeshua Messiah will suffer persecution. All right, that's a guaranteed thing right there. If you even strive to live a little bit of righteousness, we can see it in the world. The simple fact of women trying to wear veils in the world, different religions and things like this, even a little bit of righteousness, they suffer persecution. But in verse 13 he says, but evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. But as for you, now this is speaking to us, as for you, continue in the things which you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from whom you have learned them. Where did we learn about Yahweh's name from? Exactly, Yisrayl Hawkins. We may have heard of Yahweh's name before coming to Yahweh's house, but no one taught us who Yahweh is until we came to Yahweh's house. And we were properly educated on how to become just like Yahweh Himself. Praise Yahweh. Do not forget from whom we learned these things from. Be looking over to 1 Yochanan chapter 3, verse 7 and 8. Now, Pastor covers this scripture almost every prophetic word, every newsletter, every sermon he almost covers this scripture. Why? Because it's something we have to understand completely. In verse 7 he says, little children. Remember, we have to humble ourselves like a little child. Little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous just as he is righteous. Those who are in Yahweh's house doing Yahweh's work, striving, they may make mistakes. We may fall 7 times. But if we pick ourselves back up and we still remain faithful to Yahweh's house and we continue on in these things, you know that that man is practicing righteousness. That woman is practicing righteousness. But he who commits sin is of the devil. For the devil has sinned from the beginning, and for this purpose the Son of Yahweh was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. And that's why we're being trained also. Becoming sons and daughters of Yahweh. So that we can destroy the works that this system is bringing forth. We're earning positions in Yahweh's kingdom. Be turning over to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 21. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 21. It's on page 733. Yeshua, this is Yeshua speaking here. He says, not everyone who says to me, teacher, teacher, will enter into the kingdom of Yahweh, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, teacher, teacher, have we not prophesied in your name? Have we not cast out demons in your name? And in your name perform many wonderful works. Did we not hold those positions in your house at one time, Yahweh? Did we not do all these great things? In verse 23, but then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who practice iniquity. Those who make an excuse give a reason of why they should leave Yahweh's house. Those who walk away from Yahweh's established pattern, those who walk away from the place that Yahweh established in these last days, that's the sentence. Yeshua is going to say, get away from me, you who practice iniquity. Look over to verse 3 in chapter 18. Matthew 18 and verse 3. It's on page 745. And he said, truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like little children, you will not enter into the kingdom of Yahweh. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this little child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of Yahweh. Humbling ourselves. We have to humble ourselves like a little child. We shouldn't have strife and fighting and arguing amongst ourselves. We shouldn't be arguing with the person that's placed over us, instructing us on what we should be doing. We should be running to the place we're assigned to work and ask, what is it that I can do for Yahweh's house? What is it that I can do to serve my brothers and sisters? What is it can I do to prepare myself better for those that are coming to Yahweh's house? Look over to Luke chapter 17. Luke chapter 17, verse 1. Then he said to his disciples, it is impossible that no temptation to sin come. All right, we're of the carnal mind. All right, those things are there. Remember, those thoughts come in. We have to learn how to control those thoughts, how to push out, replace those negative thoughts with positive thoughts. All these things that we've been taught. But Yeshua said, but woe to him through whom they come. Not to him to whom they come, but through whom they come. Those that bring a false doctrine. Those that whisper a little doubt. Those that speak evil against the dignitaries in Yahweh's house, or even the dignitaries in the world. Every authority is established by Yahweh, and we have to respect those authorities. Praise Yahweh. But he says, woe to him through whom they come, who brings forth this false doctrine, saying, did Yahweh indeed say? Yes, Yahweh did say. And this is what Yahweh says also about you. It would have been better in verse 2 for you that a millstone were hung around your neck and you were cast into the sea, than you should deceive one of these little ones and cause them to fall away. That's a great warning from Yeshua Messiah. Praise Yahweh. Be turning over to Galatians chapter 1. Galatians chapter 1, starting in verse 6. It says, I am astonished that you have so quickly turned away from the one who Yahweh called you into love, the Messiah, to another message. So this is being called into a different message, a message that doesn't come from Yahweh's house. Something that someone else is bringing forth. It says, not that there are any other glad tidings, just that there are some who trouble you and are trying to pervert the message of Messiah. But even if we or a malak from heaven should preach a message other than what we preach to you, may he be accursed. As we have already said, so now I say again, if any man preaches any message to you contrary or different from what you have received from us, what you have received from Yahweh's house, it would have been better for that man to have had a millstone tied around his neck. In verse 10 he says, so now, who am I trying to please, man or Yahweh? Do I seek to be a man pleaser? If I were still trying to please men, I would not be a servant of the Messiah. Romans 8, 1 through 11. Those that seek the lust of the flesh, they don't seek to be a servant of the Messiah. They don't seek to be a true seed of the witness Yisrayl, taking on that attitude of servitude that we must have. Now we see the judgments that come to pass by breaking Yahweh's laws. But turn over to Yechezkel. Yechezkel chapter 18. Yechezkel chapter 18 and start in verse 20. This will be my last scripture. It says, the soul that sins, it will die. The son will not bear the iniquity of the father, nor will the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteous of the righteous will be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked will be upon himself. But if the wicked will turn from all his sins that he has committed, and keep all my statutes, and do that which is lawful and right, then he will surely live, he will not die. And his transgressions that he has committed will not be mentioned against him, and his righteousness that he has done, he will live. Do I have any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, says Father Yahweh? No, but rather that he would turn back from his wicked ways and live. But when the righteous turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity, and does according to all the abomination that this wicked man does, should he live? All his righteousness that he has done will not be mentioned in his behalf. In his trespass that he has trespassed, and in his sin that he has sinned, in them he will die. In verse 32, for I have no pleasure in death from him who lives and says, Father Yahweh. Therefore turn and live. We have still time. Even if we forsook the calling, we still have time to turn and live. If we've allowed ourselves to be separated from Yahweh or Yahweh's house, we still have the time to repent, to turn and live. But that has to come from us. No one in this world can do it for us. We have to bring forth those fruits befitting repentance. We cause separation. We cause Yahweh's face to hide himself from us. We shut ourselves off from Yahweh when we separate ourselves from the things that we've been taught from Yahweh's house. And then we forget from whom we've learned them. Without those things, we have no hope. But there is still time, surely, to turn and live. If you'll all please stand. I have the great privilege and honor to turn the services over to one of our greatest teachers in the world, the great white buffalo.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'm going to be talking about one form of disrespect, and it's cost people's lives, and it's because of unlawfully judging people by the color of their skin. So, Yahweh called us not because of the color of skin, but to repent of the sin of judging people by the color of our skin. So, I have a story, and it's from Wikipedia, and it's called The Murder of James Byrd Jr. It's from Wikipedia, and it says, James Byrd Jr. was an African American who was murdered by 3 men, of whom at least 2 were white supremacists, in Jasper, Texas, on June 7, 1998. And 3 men dragged Byrd for 3 miles behind a pickup truck along an asphalt road. Byrd, who remained conscious through most of the ordeal, was killed when his body hit the edge of a culvert, severing his right arm and head. So he was conscious and he knew what was going on. But these men had the malice to tie something around his neck and drag him on an asphalt road behind a pickup truck. The murderers drove on for another mile before dumping his torso in front of an African American cemetery in Jasper. Byrd's lynching by dragging gave impetus to passage of a Texas hate crimes law. It later led to the federal Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, commonly known as the Matthew Shepard Act, which passed on October 22, 2009, and which Barack Obama signed into law on October 28, 2009. Lawrence Russell Brewer was one of the men. He was executed by lethal injection for this crime by the state of Texas on September 21, 2011. King remains on Texas death row while appeals are still pending, while Barry was sentenced to life imprisonment. So, that was a story of a person who had lost his life due to racism. So, there's only one race, and that's the human race. And in fact, the peaceful solution has taught us that if we disrespect someone, that we are simply saying that they do not have a part to be in the human race. So on page 98 of the respect unit, if you have your respect unit, you can read along. On page 98 of the respect unit, the peaceful solution, it says, there is value in the existence of all human beings regardless of where they were born, the color of their skin, or their cultural practices. When people in society ignore or refuse to accept these facts, the result is disharmony, fear in a society that cannot function at its optimal best. So it says disharmony. We are supposed to be in harmony, not disharmony. Disrespect for others because of their nationality or cultural belief is called racism. Racism promotes an ideology that there is a difference in the value of human existence and gives a false impression that one group of people is superior to another. Racism is an unreasonable hatred directed at an individual or an entire group of people and is expressed in many ways such as prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. Regardless of how it is expressed, racism in our society devalues the life and worth of others. It can lead to violence and aggression and destroys the trust and respect that must exist between people if there is to be peace, unity, and harmony in society. The definition of prejudice, it literally means to judge. So let's stop right there. And let's turn over to Deuteronomy 17, verse 9 and 11. Verse 9 through 11. It's on page 161 of your book of Yahweh. Deuteronomy 17, verse 9 through 11 on page 161. It says, "Go to the priest, who are Levites, and to the judge who is in office at that time. Ask for their decision, and they will give you the sentence of judgment." So it says there that we're not supposed to judge, but we are supposed to go to the priest and ask for their sentence of judgment. Verse 10 says, "You must act according to the sentence they pronounce for you at the place Yahweh chooses. Be careful to do all they order you to do." So it shows that you must go to the priest, ask for their decision, and then follow that instruction out that they give you. According to the law they teach you, you shall do. And according to the decisions they give you, you shall do. You must not turn aside to the right hand nor to the left from the sentence they pronounce for you. So it shows there that we are not supposed to judge. We're supposed to take matters to the priest. So prejudice, it literally means to judge something or someone without first getting and examining all of the facts. Prejudice in our society can manifest itself as an irrational suspicion or hatred of a particular group of people. The definition of stereotype, it means set image. This word is derived from the process of making metal plates for printing. So applying this word to people means forming an instant picture of an individual or an entire group of people. Stereotyping results in generalizations about people without recognizing them as unique individuals. Some examples of stereotypes are: all black people come from Africa, all tall men play basketball, and all women like to cook. I added one in there, and it says, all people who use the moon to set the feast the way Yahweh tells us are lunatics. Now, are these really true? Just listening to them, are these really true? No. So, racism is a false concept that comes from a lack of understanding and hate. So, we should have the same desire for our brothers to get into the kingdom, even if they're a different nationality. We should have the same desire for them to get into the kingdom, just as we have that desire for us to get into the kingdom. And if we want to do that, then racism is not that way to go. In the parenting manual, page 26, well, here's the parenting manual. First, let me tell you something. This is the owner's manual for a child, okay? And so, in this owner's manual, the pastor has written for us, on the note to the parents on page G, it says, The Peaceful Solution Character Education Program is designed to teach children moral excellence in a world that is increasingly becoming morally bankrupt. So, if we turn over to Matthew 24, verse 12, you should all know this scripture. Matthew 24, verse 12. On page 752, it says, "And because iniquity, the breaking of Yahweh's law, will abound, the love of the many will grow cold." So, this is a system that's morally bankrupt. Let's turn over to page 26. On the bottom of the page, it says, "Teach your children to care about others, regardless of their nationality or ethnicity." It says, "Hate is a learned behavior. Babies are not born aware of the decisions that we create among ourselves. The variations in our skin color and nationalities become only important to our children if they are important to us and those in our immediate environment. Search yourself to see if any prejudices and stereotypes about others exist within your ideologies. Then root them out. Ask yourself if you accept generalizations about groups of people and place them upon the individual." So it says there that babies are not born aware of the things that we create among ourselves. So let's teach our children right and not to have these stereotypes. So a child at 6 can tell the difference between right or wrong. In 1 Kings, it gives an example of it. 1 Kings 2, verse 23 to 24. That's on page 302. It's my last scripture, page 302. 2 Kings. And it says, verse 23 to 24, it says, "From Jericho, Elisha went to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some youths came out of the city and ridiculed him. They said, 'Go on up, you bald head. Go on up, you bald head.' So he turned around and looked at them and pronounced a curse on them in the name of Yahweh. Then 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the youths." So Yahweh, they mocked the prophet because he was different from them. And Yahweh showed them that racism is not allowed. So we should have the same desire for our brothers to get in the kingdom. And make sure that we root these things out from among ourselves. And now if you'd all please stand. I have the privilege and honor to present to you the one sent, the greatest teacher in the world, the great Khan, Yisrayl Abel Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh! Wow! Oh, that's for you, Yahweh. You may be seated. I love you too. Yahweh bless you. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you today. May you have great understanding given by Yahweh. This right here should bring joy to your hearts. This is green ears. This card says, "This is a poem to my daddy. In the house of Yahweh, seek for me with your eyes. I come out at a certain time. Don't call my name. Though I have an ear, I cannot hear. I'll do my best to move to you so you can sight a moon that's new. So, the Sunday night, be watching. It's not supposed to be there, but it might. It might fool us, so we've got to watch, okay? And then Monday night is when it's supposed to be. I'll see it first, and then I'll show you where it is. And rejoicing, rejoicing, rejoicing. That's till later. David told me he didn't have time to do that. And I said, oh, yeah, you do, David. I'm too old. I'm slowing down, he said. No, David, get that out of your mind. Jump up and down a little while. Got to jump higher. That'll give you more strength. I've got something here I've got to go over before I start this sermon. A lack of understanding the Bible is what's contributing to today's woes, says Yisrayl Hawkins, and that's up to, I'm going to stretch it just a little, 80,000 news medias ran that thing. It's actually 79,824 news medias throughout the United States. Now that's not counting the ones, and this has gone global. And if you haven't read this article, please read this article. It is great. The one out this week is The Peaceful Solution. Character Education Incorporated announces Spring 2014 Educational Convention. And that's up over 50,000 news medias running that today. Praise Yahweh. That's our work. The House of Yahweh is reaching out to the world, as Yahweh said we would. At this time, we're reaching the world, going live right now to the entire world. You could wave to them if you were on the camera. What we're seeing today, I was just told, I don't want to bring it till next week, but the suicides. Now that kind of shows you a picture of today's world. Now they're extremely high at this time, and I think already this year there's been around 1,400, I think, or more, of businessmen. Now this is businessmen committing suicide. Now if you can imagine the business world, now this is the school of higher learning. The schools of higher learning. And that's what's committed suicide already this year. I forgot how many a day, but it's extreme. And that's taking place here. But you're in a society where, now this is businessmen. The military is the same. Military, our children that we're sending out to war. When you think of this, you need to think of 1 Samuel 7 and 8. And, of course, Yahweh shows there how He is going to protect you, His work. He shows this in no uncertain terms, and through the leader, through the one sent, which was Samuel, the great prophet of Yahweh, Samuel, at that time. And Samuel said, yes, if you'll put away your gods, that should bring to you Genesis 3, verses 1 through 5. That should automatically just click it in your head. Satan says, here, accept a little sin, and you'll be like the gods. Well, Samuel said, Yahweh's not going to protect you if you do this. You let this little bit of evil come in, and you cut yourself off from Yahweh. So Samuel said, put these gods away from you, and yes, Yahweh will do his job. This is the same thing that was said in Isaiah 59 by the great prophet Isaiah. It was said by the other prophets too, but in other ways. Here a little and there a little. You can put the complete story together. In today's time, it calls it, what does he call this place? The protected place. The protected place. Meaning Yahweh is going to protect this place, and you're dealing with Yahweh if you think you're going to destroy it. Do I worry? No. I put my trust in Yahweh completely. And I told him this years ago, I can't fight Satan. I don't intend to. I don't want to fight anymore in my life. I don't want to ever fight again. I want to do your will. I want to teach your ways. But you take care of the work. And of course, that's what he shows in the Holy Scriptures, and that's what he's going to do for you if you don't accept this evil along with the righteousness. Now, remember this. What has taken place and what is taking place in the world today, and why we're seeing all this suicides and the wars. You know, you can, if you've watched the news at all this week, you'll know that peace has been taken from the earth. Now, where would you find that information before it ever took place? Of course, it's in Revelations, the 6th chapter, speaking of the time period of that Yahweh shows you later, his work, the time of the trumpet, the time of the trumpet. Get that in your mind. The world today has teachings to make every woman a whore, every woman, every female a whore, to make every man a male prostitute. I mean, this is their schooling. And it starts from day one with the television sets in the homes. It teaches them how to dress. What do you think Victoria's Secrets is? It's pretty easy to see if you look at women of the world. If you're standing on the corner watching all the girls go by, as the song taught you to do back when I was a child. And I said, you'd have to be an idiot to do this. Even back then I said that. But I was a dumb okie. Well, I still am. I was talking to some people this week about farmers and about becoming a priest. And I said, you know, you're not here to learn how to work, to learn a profession in a butcher shop, in the garden, in the chicken house, but you're here to learn how to teach what goes on in a butcher shop, that is a kosher butcher shop, in a kosher chicken house. Yeah, we have kosher chicken houses. In a kosher garden, without commercial fertilizers. You can't run a commercial. You can't run a kosher garden with commercial fertilizers. And if you're living in a city, you can't water your garden and have a kosher garden with city water. And I feel sorry for the people in the city because of what they're putting in the water. And then they're saying, well, we just don't know where these this flesh-eating parasites came from. There's just no telling. They're just everywhere now. They're in your shower room. Oh, I wonder how they got there. on your kitchen sink. Wonder how they got there. Well, they're just everywhere, the doctor says. You can get them off of the doorknobs, off of clothing. It takes them a long time to die, no matter what they're on. But this is today's world now that we're living in. But I said we're here to learn every aspect of life. I often wondered why Yahweh put me behind a donkey, a mule, pulling a plow. Well, I could teach that right now easily. I could teach people how to ride horses. I could teach people how to make harness, to pull wagons. I could teach people how to build a wagon. I never got into blacksmithing, but I saw it done, and I think I could teach people how to make a rim that goes on a wagon wheel. Yahweh has given me bits and pieces of knowledge, not because He wanted me in the profession of blacksmithing or building wagons, but because He wanted me to be able to teach. And of course, as He brought this Okie on up, He brought him to a certain point, seeing today's world, living in today's world, learning how it operates, so I could teach others not to make the mistakes that I made coming through life. I know one thing, and I know I've heard it said I don't know how many thousand times, oh, if I had only known. If someone had just told me this, why on earth didn't my parents tell me this? Well, of course, it's still being said. I called one of our correspondents this week, and I said, I want you to call this person in Maryland and talk to her, two of them, in fact. I said, her son just died of an overdose, and I told him all the questions to ask, and it'll be in the letter soon where you can read it, the interview that they had with her. But this will be in the course with the Peaceful Solution letters that I want to write concerning this. But what struck me about the interview, the woman said, one of the women said, I just asked myself, how did I get here? How did I get here? And of course, the here she's talking about was that her son had just died of an overdose. It's bad. And of course, they had, what struck me even greater was that Washington had sent one of their top representatives on drugs to hold a town hall meeting and with the people to see what they could figure out was causing all these young children to take overdoses and killing themselves. And some of the businessmen are doing the same thing. Some that have guns. One man said, I stood and watched my friend. I was as close as I am to you. He put a gun under his chin and pulled the trigger. Others, businessmen, are jumping out windows of their offices to stop the pain inside their head, the fear inside their heads that they're facing in today's world, saying to the rocks and the mountains, give us some protection. Well, of course, the rocks and their mountains, the main one being the Pope, the Roman Catholic Church, they have no answers. Their people are diminishing. They're getting desperate. So they're wanting to apply force now to maintain their force, their way of force. That's Nimrod. which means rebellion. So they're wanting to resurrect this Roman Empire to once again force people under the rulership of the Catholic Church. The people don't want this anymore. Their people are turning, they're losing members, so they're trying to save themselves. They're trying to save their system, and they're looking in advance what it's going to be like a couple of decades from now, and they know that it's dwindling, so they know that their power is dwindling too. So they're making moves right now with the leaders of the world. That's what we see in Revelations, which I intend to cover fully this feast, hopefully, Yahweh willing. And I told Yakanan this morning that we need to get these tapes starting today in a row where the people who come, we can tell them to go back to a certain date and start watching, and this whole series will be brought through, and they can watch this series in one session, several hours of one session, at one session, or they can break it up and watch it, but they can get the complete story, because what is wrong, what we're facing today is the short memory span, where people, they come and see and they hear like you're doing now, but they quickly forget. Being trained with the computers of the world, this is another training session that takes you into whoredom. The 666, that computer, the word computer, yes, I was horrified when I saw that and brought it out in the mark of the beast. But it's a necessary thing to reach the world with today. And that Yahweh chose their own system that they invented for us to reach out to their people. Praise Yahweh. And show that these things can be used for righteous purposes. And of course, that's what we're set up here for to do in the House of Yahweh. We've been working at it for years, and we're streaming live right now to all the world. They can see this program right now taking place. Well, during the feast, I'm going to cover Yahweh's last day's work to where everyone will understand without a doubt. I mean, if you see these scriptures and you see the background that goes with these scriptures and the details that was written thousands of years in advance, that you'd have to be a complete idiot not to understand it, put it together and understand it, and believe. Like I said, there's no unbelievers; they're just unlearned and ignorant. If you forget what you've learned, then you go back to the idiocy of becoming an unbeliever. But if you know, there's no way you can keep from believing. Because you say there's no way this could take place like it took place without Yahweh Himself. Yes. Well, of course, you see these things taking place. You see people committing suicide. They're helpless. They're without an answer. And Yahweh showed Samuel. He showed us at the same time. You can't go without Yahweh. You may think you're powerful and almighty, and you think you're smarter than all the priests put together. I've seen people that said that. I've heard it said. I've heard it come from the mouth. I'm smarter than all the priests put together. And wound up showing how goofy they were, how stupid they were in leaving the only place of salvation. Well, Yahweh wants us to know that we're forever going to need Him. This being is I say trillions of years just to give you a number, but it's limitless ahead of us. Light years away, put the biggest number you can. You couldn't exaggerate it enough. He's ahead of us. But He's our Father, and He's willing to guide us and teach us and protect us all at the same time. No one can outdo Him. That's right. No one can outthink Him. You think you got a scheme to destroy the house? Yahweh knew this. He knew you were going to have that scheme before you ever came here. And He made provisions to protect His work from you. What an idiot it is. We boast. We think we're so almighty smart. We think we're so brave. We think we're so big and mighty. We boast because we wear the badge of a general. A general? I could write that on a sign myself and hang it on your chest. It wouldn't help any more than it's helping them. Hang 40 signs on their chest and they'd still be an idiot. An intellectual idiot. I try to tell people that start the speech class, and I hope it sinks in. What can 2 million Chinese do that you can't? A Chinese person, 2 billion of them, can do something that you can't. Does that show how stupid you are? No, it shows what they were trained to do and you weren't. If you'd have been trained as an Okie on a farm, you would be able to make hens lay eggs and cows give milk and separate the cream. You would be able to show people how to survive. Now, if you're raised on a computer, can you eat a computer? If you're an electrician, wow, you're smart, aren't you? You can wire a house. Can you eat the electric lines you put in there? So which is the most important? Guarding and keeping the garden growing? I'm telling you, Yahweh wants you to learn these things. To be a priest. You know, the school, I told the trainees, the training priest, I said, you know, the school that Eliah and Elisha had, this was a school of priests. And if you just look at what he's telling you there, these men knew how to build harness that they could use on an oxen. How important is that? Well, it'd be very important if you want to eat. They knew how to preserve food. They also knew how to coax or kill that oxen. That was showed to you there in the same writings. All of these things were shown. So many things were shown in that writing, and people read over it and never get a thing that's said. Well, that's what we're going to do from now through this feast. We're going to get the points that Yahweh brings. And then I'll show you in there how stupid you were before we started and how wise you are at the end. But now, does that make you better than the Chinese that haven't been here yet? No. They could spell Chinese, something you can't. They probably can't speak American, but maybe they can. But what Yahweh trains you in is important. And I tell our young priests, you know something that the world don't know. And you're the only ones that can teach it right now. And right now, you are very important. Now, you're going to be very important throughout all eternity, because what you're learning now, you're going to be training other teachers to teach throughout all eternity. Yes, that's going to be your job. You're going to be teachers. Teachers of farming, teachers of kosher, killing animals. Yes, that's going to be done. Their sacrifices and their offerings, I will accept, Yahweh said. From one new moon to another and one Sabbath day to another, I will accept these things. Well, here we see now the president and the pope. President and the Pope this week. These are very important men in the world, and they're bringing about a very important jobs, both of them, jobs that are going to end. President Obama, I admire the man, but the governments of and by the people are going to cease. The end, that's what it means. It means the end of man's governments of and by the people. And those governments will be given to the saints of the Most High, which will convert them over to the kingdom of Yahweh. That's your job. Well, in trying to read between the lines and getting a little here and there, which you're not going to get a bunch, but I can see prophecy being fulfilled here in this information. Conservative Catholics, of course, criticize Barack Obama. And, of course, that's the start of this article. And this was meant to bring him to the Pope for recognition and support, because he can get a bundle of votes from the Catholics in this way. The President and the Pope are to discuss foreign policy, including Middle East and Russian annexation of Crimea and the Ukraine. Those are the things that they were discussing. Now, what does that tell you? The Obama left his office. The meeting went longer than scheduled, which meant it took some time to cover this thing and get it right. So Barack Obama leaves his office with what he's supposed to do and knows that he's got to follow these instructions and will follow these instructions. Well, the instructions given unto him are given unto us, was given unto us. I wrote them in a book now. I wrote these things in a book, these instructions that Pope Francis gave to Barack Obama. This is in our time period. Get that in your mind, because I wrote this back in the 70s. We didn't publish the book, I don't believe. I believe the great Kohan Shaul told me that we didn't publish the book till the 80s. But the Mark of the Beast 1, Volume 1, is where I put that information, what the Pope Francis told Barack Obama in the meeting this last week, this present week we're still in that meeting. And if you'll go back and start reading, you will see what Barack Obama is going to do. Would you say right now that peace has been taken from the earth? Have you seen all the wars that's going on, the upheavals, the arguments? Have you seen, from what I've told you in your mind's eye at least, people committing suicide? Even the soldiers committing suicide, businessmen? These are the upper class citizens committing suicide. I didn't just tell you that as news. I tell you this because this is what the world is seeing right now, prophecy fulfilled. Peace has been taken from the earth. Right now. And he sends out this man, he sends out these orders for the next things to take place. And Yahweh even tells you it's going to take place in this generation. And then he gives you some more information saying it's going to take place in the days of this man. In the days of this man, not after the days of this man, but in the days of this man, this is going to take place. And then he tells you, well, who is this man? And then he tells you what he's going to be called. Besides a fool and an okie and all kinds of things, Yahweh tells you the names this man is going to be called and how he named him himself. how Yahweh said, I named you. And then he says, I'm going to even mention your name from the bowels of your mother, meaning it's going to come from one of your family, which it did. A 1-year-old boy named that person who in his days these things are going to be fulfilled. Not after his days, but in his days. In the days of this man, the prophecy said, in those days. And Yeshua says that generation is not going to pass until these things be fulfilled. Boast all you want to, but these are the things that's going to take place. They're written and they're going to be fulfilled, and Yahweh says, not one of them are going to fail. Not one.
Praise Yahweh.
Once upon a time in America, Catholic candidates had to convince voters they wouldn't take orders from the Pope. Now presidents eagerly seek meetings with popes. Well, you saw that. No, you're probably not that old. I saw it in the presidents. And they would deny that, even though they were Catholics, they would deny, well, it don't make any difference whether I'm a Catholic or not. I'm not going to do what the Pope says. I'm going to do whatever I think is right. And everybody knew the man was lying. They knew he was going to follow the advice of the Pope. But they made it in as presidents. And of course, they had Catholic votes behind them. And of course, the Catholics outnumber. So even though they're diminishing and have for quite some time, they at that time, the other people, the Christians, the others that made up the minorities, now they insisted, or they would go against them big time. If they said they was going to follow the advice of the Pope, they would all vote against them. The Pope is also a world leader. Now he is a world leader. Well, lo and behold, I told you that in the Mark of the Beast back in the 70s, that he was going to be a world leader right now. And this man, the world is going to worship him, and they're going to follow him, and Satan, the devil, is going to give him his power, his seat, and great authority. And he is going to rule the earth, or try. He's actually going to try to rule the earth, but he's not going to succeed. Now that's what's going to take place in this generation. Praise Yahweh. He's going to try to bring back the Roman Empire, which consisted of an army, as Daniel 11:31 says. The army will stand on his part. And of course, the religious leaders who condemn every form of holiness. He will make war with the saints, Daniel 7 says, and I bring that out in detail, where he changed the Sabbath days. How many people do you see in the world today that's keeping the appointments, the Sabbath appointments that Daniel said in chapter 7 was going to be done away with by this religious leader that has an army standing on his behalf? You don't see any, do you? Do you see anybody today keeping the feast days? No, not except the House of Yahweh. Well, the book of Yahweh says that's the only ones that's going to do it. And he says, I'm going to have to establish it in the last days. It's not going to exist. Why not? It was then. It was existing in Yeshua's day. What do you mean I'm going to have to establish it in the last days? I mean, dummy, it's going to disappear. It's not going to be here. And then Yahweh shows you what generation is going to be established in the days of this certain person. In the days of that person, it'll be established. Pretty amazing, huh? And then he tells you this person is going to branch out and he's going to establish it. Was Zechariah lying? Are you smarter than Zechariah? Those prophecies were fulfilled. It was established, as the great Kohan spoke before me, just brought out and brought you the meaning. I thought that was amazing. I didn't tell him what I was going to speak on. He didn't tell me what he was going to speak on, but they both run together, including that great message from the young to-be priest, White Buffalo, who brought an excellent message, I thought. Some worldly person mentioned it, said, you know, that's what this scripture in Joel, she said, use the book of Joel. Says that's what that book of Joel says. Said that those people are fulfilling that. Wow. Did you know that? Well, anyway, all these things are taking place in the reestablished house of Yahweh. Now, to establish it meant it was not going to exist. And it was standing as a beautiful, strong building, blocks of which it took 1,000 people to pull with ropes and sand underneath. And they'd pull those things up, thousands of people on ropes. Yes, you couldn't do this with just a few men. And they'd build sand mounds, and they'd bring one rock slowly up that sand mound, and this took weeks. It was like going from Texas to Oklahoma in a covered wagon. You know, you didn't just do it instantly. You didn't do it in one day like you do in an automobile today. But since knowledge increased in the days of this man, in the days of this man, Yahweh said, this messenger, this is going to take place. In the days of this messenger. Won't be before that, he said. In the days of this messenger, it will be. And lo and behold, it was. In the days of this messenger, the house of Yahweh was established. And lo and behold, here it is. We're sitting in it. You'd have to be a fool not to see this is the house of Yahweh. It's called the house of Yahweh. It's established by this messenger. In this days of this messenger. Not before this messenger, not after the messenger is gone. No, but in the days of this messenger. Yahweh said all of these secrets are going to be revealed. Secret, in the last days I will establish my house. But Isaiah, Yeremiah, Yizkiah, here's the house standing here. What do you mean? It's already established. What are you talking about? What do you mean Zion's going to be plowed like a field? Zion's covered up with the house of Yahweh. Solomon just wrote a receipt to the people here. The high priest wrote a receipt to the people here for their tithe from the house of Yahweh. And you're saying, what do you mean it's going to be established in the last days? It's established right now. Can't you see this, Solomon? Can't you see this, Isaiah? What are you making a prophecy like this for? What are you, a Okie? The Pope is also a world leader, said Thomas Reese, a senior analyst with the National Catholic Reporter. I was going to tell you, while they were having this meeting that I was telling you about, that our correspondent I sent to get us a story and get all the facts on it, while they were having this meeting with the man from Washington in the fire station with the city managers, the managers of this city that I'll name in the letter, at 911, another 911 called in, the correspondent said, called in, and the meeting had to be postponed because the fire department had to go and take care of another heroin overdose, another one. Two mothers were there testifying at that meeting about their sons taking overdose. One of the sons survived, but his brain was like jelly. Now, that's what you want for your children, right? The other one, it was too late. The dad kicked in the door because they suspected something was wrong and couldn't get the boy to answer. He still had the needle in his arm, but he was dead. And while this meeting was going on, trying to figure out what in the world can we do to stop this, while this meeting was in session, another 911 call came in with another heroin overdose. Why? Why would this be in this generation? After all these years of training, mankind training for 6,000 years, have we gone downhill for 6,000 years? Well, that right there looks like you have the answer. And the best they can come up with, now here's what they come up with. They're not going to do away with heroin. They couldn't get the people to leave it alone. They'd make their own. It's cheap. It's like marijuana. By the way, they pass that in some places too, and people are driving for a long distance to try the stuff. Don't let these drugs, my friends, enter your minds. And they will if you take them into your body. Praise Yahweh. Don't let them get into your brain. Don't let them get into your mouth. Try to stay away from all drugs. Some people go to doctors and they get a surgery, they get a tooth cut out or something like this, and the pain, the doctors automatically give them a prescription for a painkiller. And of course, they're unsuspecting. They don't even know what they're doing when they take that painkiller. They don't know that could get them hooked. And oftentimes it does. Now, if you put together all the things I've told you about the confusion that's going on right now in the people's minds, like is shown in Leviticus, the 18th chapter. You see the confusion here. You see how the brain inside has already got parasites, microparasites inside the brain. It's already causing confusion. It may be just a little bit. Now here is a very intelligent man jumping out a window to take his own life. Several of them are doing it with a gun or taking an overdose to kill himself. Now here you can see the confusion. Well, you add to that a painkiller, which also goes to the brain and tells the brain, no, your body's not in pain. Well, it does something to the mind. The next thing you may be doing is out looking for someone standing on the street corner, maybe in a brown bag district, That's how easy it is in today's world. And normally they start out, if they got money, they start out with the higher price stuff, $35 for one little shot. But normally after a while, the shots, they take so many, they wear off too quickly. So they start going to the cheaper stuff, and heroin is the cheaper stuff. And when it doesn't work long enough, like many of the Hollywood actors that are teaching all the women to follow Victoria's Secrets, they do this too. And of course, it's advertised on television that these gods are doing this. After a while, it gets to where they're wearing off so rapidly, you have to take more of them. So this is the world that you're stepping into when you take the first one. Remember that. And you tell yourself, like everybody else now, you tell yourself, oh, I'll just take this one. Yeah, that's what they say about marijuana. Oh, I can quit anytime I want to. The problem is they never want to. I guess that's their problem. They just never want to quit it once they get on it. And then they go from that to something heavier. The Pope is also a world leader, said Thomas Reese, a senior analyst of the National Catholic Reporter. I would call him a leader of the spiritual superpower. The spiritual superpower. Well, that's exactly what Revelations, the 6th chapter, shows that he is, and then the 12th chapter shows that he is of this superpower that comes from Satan the devil. Barack Obama, who met with Pope Benedict in 2009, is the 11th consecutive president and the 12th overall to have an audience with the Pope. All the presidents are meeting with the Pope to get their orders. Meeting with popes can help presidents with large swaths of Catholic votes, but presidents must negotiate now. Get this, they must negotiate difficult political terrain with the Pope. Well, of course, when he gives an order, they expect it to be obeyed. And if they don't obey that order, then the Pope, as Malachi Martin says, he has the power standing behind him. One of the power systems is called the Great Eight. These are the men with the money. They're also the men with the political power behind them, because they finance a lot of different organizations and a lot of different businesses. Their money spreads out, so it's like the tentacles of an octopus. So they have the power to pull in and divide. They can say, Malachi Martin said, whether a nation or a government stands or falls. This is how strong they are. And the Pope has this power behind him. Now, he's not popular among the people. But if you remember, he gained this power by force, by fear. It all started in Israel when they became the leaders of Israel. And they had one king who became a great king. And Daniel said, you're a great king. You have a great power, and all of this is going to be given to you. And wherever there's life on earth, you're going to be known there. So you're really going to be great. But you are going to fall, and your governments are going to fall. And who are they going to be given to? A bunch of Okies. Yeah. Who knew they had to depend on Yahweh. Who loved the thought of depending on Yahweh. who love the thought of Yahweh being their leader. You know, the great wisdom that this being has, you know, I would tag along with him forever. To get the crumbs that falls from his table, the drops that fall from his lips, the wisdom that comes from that man's mouth, his eyes, and he calls me clothed with the sun. Well, he's the one that did it, Yahweh Himself, and in the days of this man that is clothed with the sun. Yes, he's speaking of a leader in these last days that he put as leader, the one sent in his house, he said, that I gave authority. He said he gave this man authority, and in the days of this leader, all these things are going to take place. All these things. If you were standing here and I was in your place, I would work with you forever. If you're sitting there and I'm standing here, I'll still work with you forever if you'll let me. I love you. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services over to another speaker.